Hey everyone, welcome to On Purpose, the #1 health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every one of you. Thank you for coming back every single week to listen, to learn, to grow. And I just want to say I'm so grateful that you take out time every week out of your schedules, whether you're walking your dog, whether you're cooking, whether you're commuting, whether you're working or editing right now. I just want to thank you for taking out time to choose education. The fact that you're choosing to learn, choosing to develop yourselves, this is the right place to be. And today's guest is someone that I've been fascinated for so many years. We've had the fortune of having incredible, curious conversations together. And today we actually get to video it and record it on audio so that you can witness it too. He's truly got one of the most fascinating minds I've ever met. The first meeting I had with him was nothing short of brilliant. And I just want to tell you a bit about him. Now, listen very, very carefully. Brian Grazer is an Academy Award winning producer, New York Times best-selling author of A Curious Mind, who's been making movies and television programs for more than 25 years. His credits include, and this is just the tiniest list in the world, A Beautiful Mind, 24, Arrested Development, Empire, 8 Mile, Friday Night Lights, amongst so many others. His films and TV series have been nominated, wait for this, 43 Academy Awards and 195 Emmys. And Brian's new book, Face to Face, is what we're talking about today. It's the art of human connection, something I know is so important to every one of you. So please welcome to the show, Brian Grazer. Brian, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you, of course.
This is such a pleasure and honor to be sitting with you.
I'm psyched. Yeah, I was really psyched. We both just got back from our vacations only last night. I was back from Provence and got up early, and you were back from, am I allowed to say Bora Bora?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. I was on a 3-year late honeymoon.
Oh, you're very busy then.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I want to kick this off by asking a curious question of my own. And I know curious conversations are your fascination.
Yes.
But you're actually a painter.
Yes.
Like that's something that you dabble in. Tell us about how you got involved in that.
I got involved in painting through my daughter. My daughter was her name is Sage. She was 4 years old. At 3, I was playing invisible Barbies with her, where you're playing with a Barbie and then she takes the Barbie away and she goes, well, the Barbie's now got red hair. And I go, I can't see the Barbie. And she says, well, it's invisible. So I thought I have to transition her to something that maybe we could do together, because I was looking at my watch. So I think at now 5 years old, we decided we'd paint together, which is something I've never done. I've never played with ceramics or painted or anything before. And so I had room to have an art studio and we became painters together. And she soon ceased to paint and I just continued to paint and still do to this day paint. And I use primarily acrylic, then oil, and then oil stick, and often pencil to highlight or punctuate faces, or usually faces, nuance.
Amazing.
Expression.
So painting is what brought your human connection together.
Yes. Painting is what brought our human connection together, and we became like completely embedded with one another on this painting.
And tell me about that. When you say the art of human connection, what is human connection to Brian Grazer? Like, what does that mean to you?
It means, well, first there's the set point of human connection, which begins with eye contact. And there's a whole story about eye contact and why I had a heightened awareness to it. Basically, human connection begins with actually looking at somebody, but looking at somebody calmly and without ambition. Just looking at them calmly and feeling them. It doesn't mean you have to pause. You have to do any weird thing, but you just have to really look at them and be relaxed and be interested. And that makes somebody feel like it validates them as a human being. It makes them feel human. And conversely, you will feel human. So it just begins with that generous act. Now, once you've established that, you're at least on the very, very beginning of the pathway to getting to know somebody, to getting to ask questions, for them to feel like I can answer those questions. And once you're on the pathway, then you can really just let biology take over, and you find things that are very interesting about them, they with you. But what I'm personally interested in doing is getting to the place where we both are, on a one-on-one, we're both reaching into our most authentic self.
Yeah.
Where whatever that truth is that lies deep embedded in you, whatever that is, to have some of that revealed. And I do this now always without any thought about it. And there is pluses and minuses to this. And I always tell people, it's like when you're reaching inside of yourself and you're really accessing that, you do say things that are stupid and you make mistakes. You're fallible. You have to say, I'm willing to have that fallibility in myself happen. But if somebody feels your soul, they forgive that and they often really enjoy it. And it usually becomes the thing that is part of the connective tissue in this connection that you're having that was bridged through just this initial set point of looking at somebody.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I don't think I'm ever going to look at someone the same ever again after that definition. That's amazing. The part that I really picked up on listening to you that really connected with me was without ambition.
Oh,
I think that's such a beautiful point. I've always felt one of the reasons why, from my monk experience, that I benefited so much is I felt I spent time with people who had no agenda for me.
Yes.
And like being around someone who has no agenda for you, who doesn't want anything from you or isn't trying to manipulate. And this is what I find fascinating about when you talk about it in this book. Yeah. And for anyone who's going to read the book afterwards, this is what I find fascinating about the way you present it. It's not a technique or a tactic for you.
No.
It's not like this manipulative strategy for you.
No.
It's like a very genuine, authentic, what you just mentioned there. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
How do you help people live it in that way as opposed to like, oh, Brian's told me I'm going to use this tactic to use it as a way of getting it? How have you come to that place of realizing that human connection is beyond tactics and strategies and sales?
That's such a great question. It's a great question. And I have a couple funny answers. Well, one is I've had people even recently, given like my movie and television success, they go, wow, what a great strategy.
Yeah.
I go, that wasn't a strategy. It's just what happened. I have no strategy. I mean, I have desires and I have, there's intentionality within the movies and television and just my actions. There's intentionality. And that's sort of the beauty of it all, like that intentionality leads you is fired up by something and it leads you someplace. Okay, so let me go back to your original question. So I found that very early in my career, it was just right before I ever produced anything. So I had to be just about turning 24 because I produced something at 24. But I was dying to meet this guy who ran movies and television for CBS. I'll even say his name. His name was Donald March. And I wanted to meet Donald March, and he knew me, and I called him once, and it took him like at least 2 weeks to call me back. So I thought if I could get into this big Hollywood party, then Donald March and people like Donald March will call me right back. So I found that, first of all, I did get in. I found that I was incredibly uncomfortable being at this party. And I felt that it was a plan, it was a construction. It was like very artificial to me. So I did see Donald March. This is really true. And I totally screwed it up. And I screwed it up like because I was nervous. I was out of my honest, real zone. And he literally never called me back ever again. Wow. Just because I said, it just didn't feel right, and people can feel when things are not, that aren't real. They can feel constructions.
Absolutely.
Particularly if you're paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of vowed at that time that I was never going to go to any party as an ambition. I would go if I thought I could have a good time. I thought if I could be naturalistic and just like, this could be really fun, or this could be a really interesting experience, or this could be a really interesting adventure. When it's just when it becomes a real thing that I'm doing. But when it becomes like, recently someone said, fly to Saudi and have this one meeting. And I thought, that's not me. I ended up going to Saudi, incidentally, and had an unbelievably wild experience, which was incredibly valuable. But I couldn't go in as a surgical, ambitious strike.
Yeah.
So I just don't think it works.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's so funny. I was just saying before this podcast, I was talking to my team, and I was just saying, for me, every podcast is a genuine conversation.
Yeah.
I can't approach it with I've got to make sure we have to ask this to get this answer. And when you start constructing it like that, it's you lose the conversation. So what to speak of business and meetings and TV and movies, it's anything that's artificially constructed. No, I absolutely love that. And oh, go on.
And I had this other flashpoint thought when you said it's a conversation that it made me think of this. It was my instinct about that party stuff was further ratified when I had to give a speech to all the firemen in America, all the fire captains in America, after having produced a movie about firemen called Backdraft with Billy Baldwin and Robert De Niro and several others. And we were in Washington, D.C., and we had to each say something. The director, Ron Howard, and the chairman of the studio had to speak. And the chairman of the studio was really very high intellect, very high IQ, very high intellect, very articulate, very, very. And he walked out on stage right before me. And I thought, wow, what's this big brain going to do? And you know what he did? He froze. And he basically said things that were like a speech and got no reaction. And I thought in that flashpoint moment, I don't have to be that. I don't have to compete with that kind of intellect. I can just speak from my heart and feelings about how I feel about the selfless nature of firemen themselves. And I got a tremendous reaction without having to do that. And it was really beautiful, incredibly beautiful, actually.
Yeah, I love that. And by the way, I just want to say, when I was reading through the book, your storytelling is unbelievable. What you do on screen and the fact that you can do it on the written page is unbelievable. I feel like I got to know people through this book. And that's what I was going to ask you with the title Face to Face. What are conversations that in your experience do you believe must happen face to face that today we're not doing because of the distractions of technology or the opportunities of email? What are the conversations that you believe are non-negotiably have to happen face to face?
I love that.
But that we're choosing to do differently.
Well, mine with you originally.
Yes, absolutely.
I was immediately magnetized to your incredibly powerful eyes. And I even commented, I remember, I just couldn't believe the sparkle and clarity of your eyes. And I didn't know that you were, I didn't fully appreciate that you were a monk. And that completely became compatible to me. I thought, wow, no wonder he had such kind, forgiving eyes. And I was really, again, very attracted to that. And, so all of my real curiosity conversations, which incidentally, mine with you, there was a professional nature to it, but I viewed it as a curiosity conversation because you're very, very, very well known, and particularly by young people, and that's who introduced me to you. But I knew of you, but I didn't know of your massive popularity. And even today, I didn't know it was the #1 health podcast in the world. It blows my mind. So, because that's just so powerful. So I think any conversation with somebody that you feel matters, I would go on these curiosity where I still do this every 2 weeks, meet someone that's expert or renowned in anything I don't do. And they're Nobel laureates, they're scientists, they're all art forms. There's Jay, there's many people. And those conversations must be experienced through eye contact, through looking at somebody face to face. And by creating that bridge, then you have the privilege to be curious. Then you have the privilege to ask questions. And you have the privilege of creating this amazing kind of alchemy that can happen. And all of the great insights that I've ever gleaned have come from these kinds of conversations. And I always just felt like each one of these conversations, yours included, is just like a dot in a greater constellation of dots. And I just have faith that they'll connect someday.
Yes.
They don't have to directly connect. They can just live in your mind and be part of the way you curate your life.
Yes.
And so any of those conversations are essential. Have to be face to face.
Absolutely. And it's so fascinating you say that, because I feel like I'm not sure I know so many people who make time for curious conversations in their lives. So it's almost like when you say that these are the types of conversations we have to do face to face, I'm almost going through and thinking, how often do we make time for that? Is that something you've made time for forever? Is this a habit that you cultivated and practiced for decades?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people would look at it and be like, oh, Brian, of course you can do that now because you have really cool friends to hang out with. But I'm guessing this is something you've been doing for years and years and years and years.
Yeah, I started this the day I graduated college,
Wow.
actually. So I've done it completely dead broke, owing people money. So just graduating college, owing money on, I don't want to go through it, but, and then I've always done this, and I created it as a discipline that I would not fail at, I would always do. I'd be obedient to this. And I would have to grovel and beg. And, when on the movie, my very first movie, Splash, I did some other things preceded it. That made me well known, but not well known enough. I mean, I wanted to meet Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb. And for a bunch of reasons, I don't have to agree with somebody. I just have to be interested in them or the excellence or their process. But it took almost 3 years for him to finally say yes. Jonas Salk took, years. But I just kept, if you do enough homework, which you have to do, and you're persistent and you're politely persistent, often I would have to wait till like one of those people's assistants had just quit and they have a new person I can actually follow to their car or something. I don't know. But so no, I've done it for my whole life.
Yeah.
It's really a way to enlarge in my life. So it enlarges my mind, creates elasticity in me, emotional capability. And then of course you gain these fantastic insights that you can transport to something.
Yeah. No, it comes across so genuinely in the way you tell it in the book, but also the way we've connected. And I think that's what everyone who's listening or watching right now, the one thing I'd love for you to do if you're sitting back at home or you're in your car is start scheduling curious conversations. Like start finding people that you're curious about, not just professionally. Like notice the difference here. It's not about a professional meeting. It's not trying to get a deal. It's not trying to close something. It's about finding someone that you're genuinely interested in that sparks your curiosity, like you said, could just be a dot that one day might connect.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I'd highly recommend that we schedule more. For me, the podcast is that.
Yeah.
Like the podcast is just like this beautiful way of just getting to like dive into someone else's mind with no need apart from wanting to learn and grow. So I couldn't agree more that it's powerful. One of the things that I'm really intrigued by is one thing that I think you can help us with. We live in a generation today where people's attention spans are just getting squashed. And so today, now you're not competing against another person, you're competing against a phone. So the phone has access, like, can anyone be more interesting than a phone? Because a phone has access to everything, right? Like, that's the question.
Yes.
How have you developed patience to stay interested in someone, even when you're wondering, what is the connection here? I'm not even sure I'm learning. Like when you're finding it almost difficult, how have you stayed interested in someone when you don't have a common denominator? Because I feel today we look for commonalities, and if we don't find it, we're like, well, there's nothing to learn.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It makes total sense. Well, how do I stay interested? Well, first of all, you don't have to stay interested. There could be there's a point where if you feel like you're forcing it or they're forcing it, then you don't have to. You just always want to be polite because we all want goodwill. We all want the wind blowing to our back.
Yes.
But it's often it's very unique. Like only just before our trip, about 6 weeks ago, I had an Uber driver, and I said, and what's good is they don't initiate conversation, so I will initiate. I said, "Where are you from?" And he said he's from Serbia, And so we got into this conversation. It led me to martial arts. And I said, well, I've taken many different martial arts. I mentioned, he goes, have you taken this Russian martial arts called Systema? I said, no. So I go, will you drive into my house? So instead of just dropping me off, he drove in. I got all of his contacts because he also said that his mother-in-law has seen me before. And I believed, I felt safe, And then I then said, will you charge me to teach me this martial arts form called Systema? He said he would. So I had him come over. Even I had a broken wrist at the time, and I still did it and learned Systema, which was a very different kind of a form of martial arts. And I was really glad to do that. But I didn't know that would happen.
Wow.
I didn't know that after the Paris terrorist attacks several years ago, that Uber driver was dropping us off at the Ritz Hotel. Mm-hmm. And I asked him this question about the tax. And I said, well, I wanted to know how it made people feel, like just how does it make you feel one-on-one on the street? Not just what the news is. Mm. And he said, shame. And I thought that was really interesting to me. And I understood it because I understood that it meant to them that they don't have the strength themselves to protect themselves. Mm. So it was about protection because they were victims recently of 2 terrorist attacks.
Yes.
So you just learn a lot if you just are open-minded.
Yes, yes. So you can learn from anyone and everyone.
You can learn from anyone and everyone.
It doesn't need to be someone that you've admired or looked up to. It could actually be...
Yeah, you just have to not get ahead of yourself and hope that it has some material reason for you.
Right.
And then it kind of something almost always good happens. And you're so right. Like in your health podcast, it's like we're living in an epidemic of loneliness, and it's just accelerating. Where we are so connected, but the possibility of loneliness is even more because of what you just said.
Yeah.
And the thing that you could speak to, is that everything, there's a metric for it within our medical system, except internal pain. Mm. And loneliness there's pain, and you can't measure it. And I just think this thing of looking at somebody is the beginning of getting out of pain.
Yeah.
And it might be the beginning of a movie or a television show or just confidence itself. Yes. Like having confidence can really, is really valuable.
Yeah. And let's touch on confidence, because I think you're so right that like sitting and talking to someone can actually be really like scary and almost feel like you're naked. Like if you feel like someone's looking at you, and especially when, like you said, like you talked about looking at someone, with compassion, without judgment, but often we're looking at people and it's very piercing, or you feel pierced by people's look. How do we develop, stepping in face to face, but how do we kind of break down those? barriers that we have of feeling really scared to be looked at or to see, which I think so many of us have. Like we look away when people look at us, like we try and avoid eye contact because we feel kind of nervous by it.
Yeah. Well, I think you could probably attest to this. Is that I mean, everybody, the number 1, 2, or 3 fear is public speaking.
Yes. Yeah.
My first year in college as a freshman, I was in a public speaking class, and it was 125 kids. His name was Mr. French. I can say this. There's some names I can't say. And Mr. French took me aside at the end of the class and he said, I really would like to recommend that you discontinue college.
Oh, wow.
It was like the most discouraging thing. Because I couldn't do it. I couldn't public speak. I couldn't speak in this class. So he really thought I should go to an occupational school and discontinue college. And so that's how acutely, nervous I was. But somebody said to me one day, just think to yourself, like, you're just giving somebody a gift. Start off by saying, I'm grateful to be here. That will be the beginning of how you can loosen up. I'm grateful to be here. Yeah. I'm grateful you're here having me. And it's the same thing with eye contact. You don't have to say I'm grateful, but you can feel like, you know what? Everyone is feeling what you're feeling. If you look at somebody calmly and go, hey, how you doing? Something good will happen. It will be very, very unusual if something good doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
that's so true. I love that.
So I think of it as just a nice thing to do, just a polite thing.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think you're so right that it can be an internal thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to even be verbalized. It doesn't need to be vocalized. It can be internal.
Say it.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And
if you start feeling that, it's kind of like I had some very famous guy say to me, I knew you before you made your very first movie, Night Shift. And now you've made all these movies and won Oscars and stuff like that. But I know you, Brian. Have you ever looked in the mirror and kissed the mirror? And I said, no, I haven't. So it just means like, take a minute to love yourself a little bit.
Yes.
And then give that to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%, 100%. And I think that's so much of it that if we've never looked at ourselves in the eye, it's hard to look others in the eye.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
like it becomes more complicated. It's like if we've not been able to truly see ourselves, then how can we allow others to see us truly as well?
Yeah, that's so
smart. And I feel like, no, you've inspired it just now. I've never said that before.
You never said it?
I've never said that before
in my God,
life.
I thought you must have already concluded that.
No, I've literally just said it right now in this conversation.
Well, that's